The 2022 season for the Dallas Cowboys was an interesting season. I think it started off, and could have been something of great promise, but injuries got in the way and it didn't end the way that a lot of Cowboys fans thought that it could or should. 2023, obviously a new year, a lot of changes that have taken place. I think the Cowboys roster looks like one that they can do some real damage in the NFC. Got Landon McCool here that's going to talk to us a little bit from Locked On Cowboys and talk to us a little bit about the Cowboys. So today, let's get into this Dallas Cowboys thing. Landon, thank you for joining us on Big B Sports Talk, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk.
All right. Thank you. Here I live, like I said, I live in Dallas. I'm about 10 minutes from the Star, and being a Steeler fan, that can be a little fun
tough
sometimes.
That's tough. I got to say real quick, my podcast partner on Locked On Cowboys is a Cowboys fan, but he kind of grew up near the Pittsburgh area, and his whole family is Steelers fans. So he's got the exact opposite problem, I'm sure, that you're dealing with most of the time.
That's crazy. That is crazy. So, Dallas Cowboys, a lot of changes. I guess the question last year didn't end the way that a lot of people thought that it could or should. Injuries at key positions. That's the thing. At some key positions kind of derailed what I think a lot of people thought was going to be a really, and they still had a good season. I just think it could have been more. And I think that's what a lot of Cowboys fans they look at the end result and how it ended. And I don't think the season was a failure. No, it wasn't. They had a good season. It's just, it could have been more. And I think that's what the lasting impression is. Looking into that as far as the Cowboys, tell me what you think about the upcoming season this year and what they can put together as far as their roster and what they are doing to have a great team this year.
Yeah, it's an interesting year. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, the season didn't quite end the way that the Cowboys wanted to. But I think that if most Cowboys fans would look at it as still a step forward, they beat Tom Brady and retired him in the first round. And I think that they put up a better game in San Francisco than they had the previous season. I think, Tony Pollard getting injured obviously took a lot of wind out of the Cowboys' offensive sails. And then it was a lot of pressure for Dak to kind of be the generating force of offense without kind of the receiving crew that he needed. So I think the Cowboys kind of figured out, listen, we need to provide Dak with some more firepower on the outside. We need to even further double down on this defense. And then, they did a pair of trades before the offseason kind of really kicked in that really, I think, upped their chances this year, trading for Brandon Cooks and for Stephon Gilmore. And I think that kind of was a direct result of what we saw at the end of the year last year, right?
Yeah.
They as the Cowboys got down the stretch, they started to have injury issues at cornerback. They got very lucky that they had a very talented young rookie in Deron Bland who was able to kind of come in and mitigate some of that. But even then, they still were kind of short a third corner, and they kind of had to cobble that together with a couple of safeties and some other folks. And then on the other side, they spent the entire season trying to cobble together a wide receiver 3.
Yes.
Whether it was T.Y. Hilton or Noah Brown when he had to come in and play, and at times even an undrafted free agent rookie named Dennis Houston, who was a starter the week 1.
Right.
So I think the Cowboys had kind of learned their lesson that they needed to kind of come in with a little bit more firepower than they had. They got the opportunity to kind of use some of the cap space that they were able to get back from the Zeke cut. And kind of spread it around to kind of get some more players that they needed. So it's interesting that the additions they have there, plus the subtractions that they had, from offensive coordinator, it's going to be difficult to kind of parse exactly how this is all going to play out. But at least it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I see it. The I guess addition by subtraction. I think the Cowboys are going to be a better football team. I think most people from the outside looking in see what they did, and the Cowboys are going to be a better football team. Diving a little bit deeper into that, offensive line, Tyron Smith. What are the Cowboys going to do? I'm sure, obviously they have a plan, but what are they going to do? Because, again, outside looking in, people look at their offensive line and what it could be. what are they going to do at the offensive line position this year?
Well, speaking of positions that have changed, right? We just got a new offensive line coach, Mike Solari, who's come in. And I think from what it seems like, he's, trying to look at the position holistically and see exactly what he has in these guys. He hasn't worked with any of them before. I think most Cowboys fans will tell you that it makes the most sense to have the offensive line going left to right as Tyron Smith, Tyler Smith, Tyler Biotish, Zach Martin, and Terrence Steele. Right. There's been a lot of talk about, we'd love to have Tyler Smith play left tackle because that's the position that he's going to eventually end up in. We really like to keep him there. Maybe we'll try Terrence Steele at guard to try to fit things around. None of that really makes a ton of sense outside the context of I'm Mike Solari, the new offensive line coach. I'm seeing what I got here. So I would be pretty surprised if the intentional starting offensive line for the Cowboys was what I just anything other than what I just described.
Sure.
Having said that, that was supposed to be the plan last year as well. And, Tyron Smith hurt his hamstring 2 weeks before the season started. Tyler Smith had to get kicked out to the left tackle, and kind of the rest is history. I think the contingency plan, I think the plan as it is right now is the line I just mentioned, Smith, Biotish, Martin, Steele. And then if something happens or when something happens to Tyron Smith, because he hasn't finished a season, in the last 6 or 7 years, Tyler steps back out to left tackle. And the real question for Cowboys fans, for people that are wondering about the Cowboys offensive line, is who's the backup left guard? Because that now has become the equivalent of previous years. Who's the swing tackle, right? Because now it's not a tackle to come out and play left tackle for when Tyron gets hurt. What we aren't sure of yet is who's playing guard when Tyler Smith steps back outside. So I think those are going to be the main storylines that we'll be following in training camp as far as the offensive line goes.
Yeah, the one thing that, you hear a lot is the Cowboys, they want to put, in a lot of teams, they want to put the best 5 out there.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You do want to put the best 5 out there, but at the same time, they also have to be in the right position. Because you saw Tyron Smith playing right tackle last year, and just for all intents and purposes, that was a disaster.
It was tough.
Yeah, and you play a position, the guy's going to the Hall of Fame as a left tackle. Going over the right tackle, everything is different, and to try to trick your mind into to moving everything the opposite direction, that's tough. Yeah. So I just think that what you put out there has to be their best 5 at the best positions, and hope and pray that everybody can stay healthy. Although it's football, so you know how that works, but we'll see. Moving on, Tony Pollard at the end of the year got hurt. I said it. It was a crusher because the Cowboys just didn't have enough weapons to go compete against that 49ers defense. Can he handle the load this year? I know obviously it's not all going to be on him, but can he handle the load, getting an uptick in carries and touches and still stay healthy and be as effective as he has been in the past?
Yeah, the running back room is going to be an interesting one this year because, obviously, the Cowboys are fully aware that they don't want to give Pollard, the full load. They didn't even give Zeke the full load. That's why that they were splitting the touches there. So the question now becomes, Pollard's going to have to take an uptick in carries, probably something similar to what Zeke had last year. And the touches were relatively close last year, all things considered, with injuries and everything. I tend to think that they are going to have to rely heavily on some of these younger running backs that they've drafted. They drafted one, and they had some undrafted free agents, and they had some folks that they brought over from the previous seasons, including Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis, who they like both of those guys a lot. I think that they have plans for Deuce Vaughn. I really think that they have big plans for Deuce Vaughn, and maybe what they plan on doing is having Vaughn kind of step into that Pollard role.
Right.
And Pollard kind of taking on the mantle of a more full-time back. I also think that despite the talk about wanting to run the football more, I also wonder if there isn't going to be maybe a shift in reliability on short yardage running and kind of a shift more towards passing, because as we move away from Kellen Moore and into the Mike McCarthy system. I mean, the plays are going to mostly stay the same, but it's the philosophy, play calling that will change, right? And McCarthy is more of a West Coast guy, and West Coast guys tend to want to throw the football short as a kind of an analog for running the football. So
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be surprised if the touches went up and the carries remained similar for Pollard if they're trying to kind of just redistribute how those touches are done by the running backs, kind of individually.
Got it. Yeah. And I'm a big Deuce Vaughn guy. I'm a K-State guy, played there, and I like what he brings to the table.
Yeah.
People they keep saying that he's little, and I'm like, yeah, he's little. I go, but the guy's a running back. He can play.
Try to find
back.
him.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He can play running back, man. He's a pretty explosive guy. So I'm excited to see what he does with the Cowboys. Speaking of Mike McCarthy taking over the play calling, I personally believe that that's going to help Dak Prescott. I have said that to several different people, that this will help him maybe recapture some of that 2021 form that he had. I think changing the philosophy is key. Do you believe, or do most people inside think that this can change Dak and get him back closer to that 2021 form?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people view when we're talking about the negatives with Dak, we're talking about the interceptions,
Right.
and I think that the most people that view that they view it as that being a product of a lot of what was around Dak and
Sure.
what Dak was kind of forced to kind of do. I think, listen, is Dak an aggressive thrower? Absolutely, he's an aggressive thrower.
Right.
Do the Cowboys want to reel that in? They shouldn't. They should absolutely not, because it's what makes him great. And outside of last year, Dak has one of the lowest interception rates in all of NFL.
Yeah, he does.
He's not he hasn't been historically a guy that throws a bunch of interceptions. He's actually rather accurate quarterback. I think if you go back and watch the interceptions individually, there's circumstance there. There was at least 6 or 7 of those where it looked like the wide receiver was playing volleyball and setting the ball for someone to come down and spike it, and instead it was a defensive back intercepting it, right? So I think that the way that you get Dak to kind of reduce the number of interceptions, you get him better talent on the outside so they can separate more. They give Dak more clear windows to throw into, and that you're not putting Dak into situations where he has to make desperation throws in tight windows in order to advance the football. So I'm a big believer in that. It's not a the way Dak is wired or the way Dak is throwing the football problem. It's the situations that you're putting Dak in is not good sort of problem. You need to give him better options on the outside. You need to put him in better situations where he's not being forced to throw into tight windows in order to get first downs and continue to move the football.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And those are conversations that I had with a lot of people last year talking about the Cowboys. Look, the Cowboys bet on a guy that was coming off a late season ACL injury and decided to pay him versus keeping Amari Cooper on the roster. And I'll argue with anybody any day till the end of time. If Amari Cooper's on the roster last year and everything is equal, they beat the 49ers in San Francisco because there's more weapons for him at his disposal. When it was just CeeDee Lamb, they just sat on and just said, yeah, we'll give you everything underneath. You're not going to beat us over the top. We're not going to let you be, especially when Pollard went out. It's like, you're not going to beat us. And just throughout the season, it just seemed like there just wasn't always enough for him. As much as people like Noah Brown and as much as he tried hard, he's not a top tier receiver in the National Football League. It's just not.
I certainly think that having Cooper would have been helpful.
Yeah.
I also understand why the Cowboys did what they did with Cooper, because it opened up opportunities for them to retain some other players that they likely would not have been able to retain outside of Cooper being gone. And I will add in that I think that Cooper has had issues with consistency at times, and the problem that the Cowboys had with Cooper, and this isn't a Cooper problem, but the problem the Cowboys had when he was on the team, it felt like there was too many mouths to feed. When Cooper is a guy that is a true number one, that you should be feeding him 10 targets a game and let him work into it. The problem is that the Cowboys they had so many mouths to feed with a healthy Gallup and a healthy CD and a healthy Cooper that if Cooper was taking a while to kind of get into the game, suddenly, they have all these offensive weapons and they're unable to move the ball. I mean, look at what was happening at the end of the 2021 season.
Yeah.
If they couldn't get Cooper into the swing of things, they couldn't get their offense going. And so I think for the Cowboys, they've got to find a way to, and look, the biggest gamble that the Cowboys lost on last year was Michael Gallup, that they thought that Gallup would be able to come back from his injury and play at a level that was at least somewhat close to what Michael Gallup was playing previously. That just never happened. He never felt comfortable with his knee. It wasn't even just a case that, he might get back in time for midway point. He got back and it just wasn't ever enough.
Right.
So I think the answer lies somewhere in between those things, right? Like what the Cowboys did was not enough. Keeping Cooper was too much. The Cowboys found a kind of middle ground where they got a speed receiver who doesn't require a bunch of touches to be effective. He could still stretch the defense, vertically without having to be targeted at all. So I think that, and a more kind of economical price that they can handle, right? So that doesn't force them to feel like they have to force him the ball. I think that this is a better situation than it was with Cooper. And again, that's not a slight against Cooper. I think that's just about the type of receiver that Cooper is, where he should be on a team where you're focusing on getting him the touches to work him in, because once you get Cooper going, he's a very difficult force to stop.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to work with Cooper and other wide receivers if you're having to force Cooper 6 targets to get him going early in the game.
Right. Well, he also, like you said, tend to see the inconsistencies that he had, because if you didn't get him going early, there were times where he just completely disappeared and didn't show up at all, which was a problem.
And what's more frustrating, when you're a Cowboys fan and you have these 3 great wide receivers and your offense can't do anything.
Yeah.
Like it just you can't find any rhythm.
Right.
You can't find any kind of, system that's going. And Dak's very much a rhythm quarterback. So if you're trying to make him kind of force the ball one way or another, it's tough. It's really tough to kind of figure out exactly how to kind of feed all those mouths, get everybody going, and then keep the offense going the entire game.
100%. I absolutely understand. So Mike McCarthy taking over the offense this year, per se. Is this, with him doing this, does it make it a make or break season for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's tough to say, but it feels like it is. Look, Mike McCarthy has been very successful with the Cowboys.
Yeah,
We've had back-to-back 12-win seasons.
Yes.
I think as far as the head coaching part of the job, he's done an excellent job. In my opinion, I think and I'll point to how the Cowboys managed their roster throughout the last 2 seasons. Look, they ended the season with some fluke injuries at cornerback, but the last 2 seasons, the Cowboys have entered in the end of the year with a 10 or 11 plus win seasons going into December, and healthy players. And that's a great setup. If your job as the coach is to set your team up for success in going into the playoffs, Mike McCarthy aced his job.
Correct.
I think that some stuff happened in the playoff games that kind of, caused some issues that obviously have been following the Cowboys for a while now. But I think as far as that part of the job goes, he's done a great job. Now he's taking over play calling. I think that is a way to kind of, tie him to his fate pretty strongly. I think the fact that the Cowboys have Dan Quinn and clearly like him as a head coaching candidate as well, is kind of puts added pressure there.
Sure.
I've heard that. I've heard everyone say, is this a make or break year for Mike McCarthy? But what I haven't heard anyone kind of come together and decide on is, well, what's the line? Is it Super Bowl or bust? Is it NFC Championship or bust? Like what's the line that he has to cross? Because I kind of think that it has everything to do with the specifics on how the season rolls out as to whether or not they should bring Mike McCarthy back.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And it's like you said, it's not like the Cowboys have been a bad football team. They have not. They have been the exact opposite of that. Have they won the Super Bowl? No. But at the same time, how many people have? You can't just keep rolling through coaches just one after another. Build a foundation. The guy's done a good job, in my opinion. I think he's done a really good job. I don't know if it's make or break, but hopefully it's not. Hopefully they still have a good season. The defense, I think that the defense it was outstanding last year. I think it's going to be even better this year. I really do. There's a lot of reports coming out that Micah Parsons is going to spend a lot more time at defensive end. I was a guy that said, if they had the personnel to move to a 3-4, it would be perfect for him to be a 3-4 outside linebacker. That's not what they do. So having said that, with him moving, or at least the reports of him moving, how good can this Cowboys defense be this year?
Oh, it could be really good. I mean, I think the thing that people are focusing on is Micah Parsons, as they should, and I'm sure offensive coordinators will. I think the thing that people should be paying attention to is all the kind of young defensive players the Cowboys drafted the previous 2 years that are all about to come into their own. Like, I'm going to talk about some down roster guys like Chauncey Golston, who, came in, was only playing like 20 or something snaps, but was rated by PFF as top 10 defensive tackles in those snaps he was taking at the end of the year. Yeah. Sam Williams is a guy who came in with very limited snaps and played at an extremely efficient level for a rookie defensive end coming into the league. Deron Bland is a guy that I've already mentioned. We'll see the rise of someone like Israel Mukamu, who was a safety, who is still a safety. He's a big safety, 6'4", 210 or something like that. Last year, when there was all those injuries, they put him in at slot corner, and he played incredible. So they have, and that's not even counting like the linebacker crew that we have, like in Cox and Clark and all these guys that like are really starting to come on into their own. Oso Digizua, I think, will take a big jump. Right. I think that there is a lot of talent on this Cowboys defense that is in that upper middle class, level. That may not be kind of like well-known names everywhere in the NFL, but I guarantee you they're all getting better. And this is a very young team that is all kind of coming together at the same time. Micah Parsons is obviously the focus there, but this Cowboys defense is as deep and talented at the top as any team in the league, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you, and you answered a lot of my questions. Is there any guys that are out there that fans maybe don't know or aren't as familiar with that they should know? I am partial to Jabril Cox. I coached him when he was 12 and 13 years old back in Kansas City. So I am partial to him. I know he got hurt early, working his way back. I'm partial. But having said that, besides anybody that you mentioned, is there anybody else that Cowboy fans, if they don't know, that they should probably start to get to know?
Well, I'll start with Jabril Cox, actually, because, he came back from his injury last year. And, look, every player deals with injuries differently, right?
Yeah.
Cox, I mean, as you can surely attest to, his game is built almost exclusively on speed.
Absolutely.
And he is just one of the fastest linebackers you're going to see. He's one of the best coverage linebackers I've ever seen coming out of college, out of LSU. And I think that is, now he's a full year removed from his injury. He got a full off season with the team, and he, made waves in the mini camp just a couple of weeks ago as a run defender, actually on the goal line, which was a great thing to hear, because that's the kind of development you want to see. So I would say that they're clearing the runway for him to get an opportunity to kind of take more snaps this year. Damone Clark is obviously another LSU linebacker that they liked a lot last year. They got a lot of snaps from. I mentioned a couple of these guys, but I think, the guy that I keep coming back to, the two guys that I would say that if you're looking for guys to take a big jump, or if you're looking for inside information on who the biggest Cowboys superstar, the next biggest Cowboys superstar is going to be, I would say it's Deron Bland or Sam Williams. Those guys, the way, rookies really, it's really hard to play in the NFL, and sure, at certain positions it's harder than others. I think corner and defensive end are two of the more difficult positions to kind of come in and play great football. And just because when you're playing corner in college, you're not playing a bunch of man coverage. You're not dealing with the same kind of coverages that you are in the NFL. Right. And at defensive end, you're just playing a different breed of athlete at offensive tackle in the NFL versus. And for those two guys to come into the league and be able to make waves, Deron Bland led the team in interceptions last year. He had 5. Sam Williams, came in on limited snaps and I think had like 6 or 7 sacks. So I would imagine both of those guys taking rather large steps this year and potentially being maybe not starters this year, But I think next year we could be talking about if the Cowboys, want to move on from DeMarcus Lawrence for some reason, or they want to move on from one of their corners, maybe Stephon Gilmore next year. I think Bland and Williams will be the guys the first up to kind of take those spots as starters next season.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. I think the Cowboys, like I said, I think they're going to have a really, really good team again this year. I've been putting everybody on the spot, so I apologize, but I'll do the same. I think the Cowboys win at least 12 games this year, if not more. I'm partial. Obviously, I'm a diehard Steeler fan. I think the AFC North is the toughest division, but I get a ton of pushback, and I understand why, because the NFC East, if not the toughest, it's right there, the second toughest. I mean, that division is going to be nuts because I still think Washington is a really, really good football team. Kind of missing a quarterback, but I think they're still a really good football team as well. So having said that, any prediction right now on what you think the Cowboys can win this year as far as the number of games?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough schedule. It is. I think the NFC East played a very easy schedule last year, and I think that this year they playing a little bit tougher. But you've got, obviously, like you said, a very tough division. The Eagles are one of the best teams in football. I think the Cowboys are right there. I think those matchups are incredible. One thing that's really interesting there is that the Eagles still have not beaten Dak Prescott.
They have not,
which is crazy. And which is nuts. But I think both Eagles fans and Cowboys fans can agree that we would love to see our teams play each other with both of our starting quarterbacks, because that didn't happen last year either.
It didn't.
So I think for the Cowboys, 11 wins, 10, 11, 12, that seems reasonable and what I would hope for. I think 10 wins gets you a wild card berth and probably not the division. Yeah. But if you can win like 12 games and obviously steal a couple from one or two from the Eagles, I would not be shocked if this team won the division at all. And if only for the fact that no team has repeated as NFC East champion, and I think it's 12 years now. It's been a long time. So I wouldn't at all be shocked if the Cowboys found a way to win it this year. But again, we talked about Washington, we talked about Philly. The Giants are also going to be a very good team this year. I think a better team than they were last year. Not that I think that they're going to win the division, but they'll steal some games and they'll make it tough. So it's going to be a fun division this year.
Yes, it will. I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate it, Landon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come join us today. Tell us, or everybody, where they can find you at.
Hey, you can find me on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Otherwise, please come check us out on the Locked On Cowboys podcast, wherever you find your podcast, or on YouTube. And follow them on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys, and follow my podcast partner, if you don't mind, at Marcus Mosier as well.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And, if you get time, we'll absolutely bring you back on right before the season starts and go from there.
Sounds good, man.
All right. Thank you.